but he quelled it quickly. He did not subscribe to melancholy moods. It wasn't the McKettrick way. In his family, a man, or a woman for that matter, played the cards they were dealt, kept on going no matter what, and tended to the best of their ability to whatever task was presently at hand. Still, there was a prickle at his nape, and Cherokee, rarely skittish, pranced sideways in agitation, tossing his head and neighing. Sawyer had barely pushed back his long coat to uncover his Colt .45, just in case, when he heard the gunshot, swaddled in the snowy silence to a muted pop, saw the flash of orange fire, and felt the bullet sear its way into his left shoulder. All of this transpired in the course of a second or so, but even as he slumped forward over Cherokee's neck, dazed by the hot poker thrust of the pain, spaces wedged themselves between moments, stretching time, distorting it. Sawyer was at once a wounded man, alone on a snow-blind street, except for his panicked horse, and a dispassionate observer, nearby, but oddly detached from the scene. He didn't see the shooter or his horse, but the calm, watching part of him sized up the situation, sensed there had been a rider. If anybody had seen anything or heard the muffled gunshot, they weren't fixing to rush to his rescue, and he didn't have the strength to draw his .45, even if he could have seen beyond Cherokee's laid-back ears. Fortunately, the horse knew that in cases like this anyway, discretion was the better part of valor. Cherokee bolted for safer territory, leapfrogging through the powdery snow, and Sawyer, hurting bad and only half conscious, simply lay over the pommel, with the saddle horn jabbing into his middle like a fist, and held on to reins and mane for all he was worth. Maybe the gunman lost sight of them in the storm, or maybe he just slipped back through the edges of Sawyer's awareness into the pulsing darkness that surrounded him. But the second shot, the one that would have finished him off for sure, never came. His mind slowed, and then slowed some more. He was aware of the thud, thud, thud of his heart, the raspy scratch of his breath, clawing its way into his lungs and then out again, and the familiar smell of wet horsehide. But his vision dimmed to a gray haze. Cherokee kept moving. Sawyer's consciousness seemed to retreat into the far corners of his mind, but growing up on the Triple M Ranch in Arizona, he'd practically been raised on the back of a horse, and the muscles in his arms and legs must have drawn on some capacity for recollection beyond the grasp of the waking mind, because he managed to stay in the saddle. It was only when the horse came to a sudden stop in a spill of buttery light on glistening snow that Sawyer pitched sideways with a sickening lurch, jarred his wounded shoulder when he struck the snow-padded ground, and passed out from the pain. Piper St. James, seated at the desk in her empty schoolroom, and glumly surveying the scrawny, undecorated pine tree leaning against the far wall, wished heartily, and not for the first time, that she'd never left Maine to strike out for a life of adventure in the still wild West. Her cousin, Dara Rose, in love with her handsome rancher husband, had painted a fine picture of Blue River in her letters, telling Piper what a wonderful place it was, full of good people and wide open to newcomers. Piper sighed. Of course Dara Rose would see things that way. She was so happy in her new marriage, and being a generous soul, she wanted Piper to be happy too. Life had been hard for her cousin and her two little girls, but Clay McKettrick had changed all that. Piper's pupils, all 13 of them, were safe at home where they belonged, and that was a considerable comfort to her. She'd spent the entire day alone, though.